Welcome to ONNpoint. I'm Tim Murphy, and I have a large group of people here today on point with me. Welcome, everybody. Let's start down at my far right. This is Howie Wilcox. Howie is the co-chair of CAPT and NEORN. CAPT, which stands for the Coalition for Algoma Passenger Trains, and NEORN, which stands for Northeastern Ontario Rail Network. Howie, you're also a board member of Transport Action Canada. Thanks for joining us here today on Point. And next I have Linda Savory-Gordon. Linda is a board member of CAPT and NEORN, and you're also involved with Nordic, are you?
That's right.
Absolutely. And then to my left, Dorothy McNaughton. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi.
Dorothy's a co-chair of CAPT. And finally, at the end, we have Brendan Sutherland. Brendan is a summer student with Nordic Institute. And today, if you haven't guessed, we're talking about trains because we have a problem in our community, and that has to do with transportation and funding, and it's been a hot button topic for a number of years, and certainly it became an issue with the past election that we just had, the provincial election. Trains were a big topic of conversation. Let's go a little bit of background. For those who don't know this, at one time, here in Sault Ste. Marie, we were connected by passenger rail service. Who's got a little bit of background on that? Howie, can you help me out with where we were before?
Sure. Well, back in the day, we had regular passenger train service out of the Sault to Sudbury that connected into Toronto or out to Western Canada or straight through to North Bay and down into Ottawa and Montreal. That service ended. They put on a Bud car, which ran for several years, and basically it was a terrible service.
The Bud car service wasn't that great?
Yes, and it didn't connect with anything in Sudbury, so eventually people just didn't use it, and it was gone. 1976, they pulled it off.
Is that how long it's been since we've had passenger rail service in Sault Ste. Marie? 1976? You weren't even born yet, Brendan.
No.
Going east, but going north, we did have service to Hearst until 2015.
We had service to Hearst, which is where, well, there's a nice segue. Thank you, Linda. Brendan, you come from Hearst.
Yeah, I was born in Hearst.
Born in Hearst. And in your lifetime, has there been rail service then?
There has been rail service, yes, and I've actually used it to go from here in Sault Ste. Marie back to Hearst to visit my family for the weekend.
Okay.
And I'm not able to do that anymore.
You can no longer do that?
No.
How, if you wanted to go home to Hearst, how would you get there?
I would have to find a ride or hope my parents can come get me.
You're not 25 yet?
I am 25.
You're just 25? Because if you're under 25, you can't rent a car. Is that true? I thought you had to be 25 to rent a car. At least 21, I'm pretty sure. I don't know. But anyway, there's still a lot of students who are coming to Sault Ste. Marie who might want to go north.
Yeah, a lot of students who are fresh out of high school are not going to have many options.
Right. Now, when you took the train, when you rode the train to and from Hearst, how much do you recall how much a ticket was for that trip?
I'm pretty sure it was a couple hundred for a round trip.
For a round trip?
Yeah.
Wow, okay, that's not cheap.
No.
But if that's all you have,
There wasn't much encouragement for people to use it at the time, so the prices were high.
So what is the issue that, okay, I also want to ask now about, because this gets confusing for people too, about who owns the rails and who owns the trains and who owns what, because there's all kinds of different companies that are involved in this system, right? So who owns the tracks? Do different people own the tracks that go north and that go east or what?
From Sault Ste. Marie north to Hearst, it's CN.
CN, so that's the
That's
travel up to
Canadian
where you live.
National. From the Sault to Sudbury, the tracks are owned by CP Rail.
Okay,
And
CP.
CP and Huron Central, which is a U.S. corporation, runs a freight service on there. They lease the track from CP.
They actually lease the tracks. Is CP responsible for maintaining the tracks, or does Huron have to maintain?
Well,
or do do
they should be, but they haven't put a nickel into the track in years. And from Sudbury over to North Bay, it's the Ottawa Valley Railway, which is also a sister to the Huron Central Corporation. So.
Do you get the impression that maybe the American companies that own the Canadian rails don't pay too much attention to them, or is that, am I wrong, or?
Well, if you look at the parent company of those two railways, Genesee and Wyoming in the U.S., they have 114 short line railways in the U.S. They are a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And checked out their P&L statement for last year,
P&L.
profit and loss statement,
Okay.
and they made in excess of $500 million US. And they're asking our governments for more money.
Oh, but there more money for freight service?
For
To upgrade the
upgrading.
track, yeah.
Okay. Now, one of the things we talked about that you were explaining to me was that freight service and passenger service, two completely different businesses, and that passenger service, passenger rail generally or ever does not make a profit.
No.
Is this true, Linda?
It's a public service, and like any of our public services, healthcare, education, our highways,
Transit.
they're all subsidized and paid for by various levels of government. So, no, passenger service is not a profit maker.
Not a profit maker, but in the past, Dorothy, there's been support from the different levels of government. Is it mostly provincial, federal? Who's funded the rails or the service?
Well, in the case of the Algoma Central Railway, it was a federal subsidy program,
Okay.
$2.2 million a year.
I remember that figure when this was
Yeah.
all, because when they yanked it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then
and-
they yanked it, and that was the conservative government at the time, and then they saw fit to reinstate it for a couple of years, and then the service just stopped. And now, the federal government says this rail line doesn't come under our
Remote passenger.
remote passenger program, because you can get to all of the places by road, which is not true.
No.
Right,
and
So-
the different coalitions and the groups have been proving this over. And how many times do you have to go back to them and say your facts are wrong? Do you feel like you're banging your head against a wall, Dorothy?
Well, I feel like there's a huge need for advocacy, and that's what we do. Because if we don't speak up for passenger rail service, who will? I mean, I'm representing people with disabilities. And the issue for us is most of us aren't able to drive or aren't able to own a vehicle because of the cost, or for someone who has seizures, you know, and they're not allowed to drive. I'm not allowed to drive because of my vision. They wouldn't want me on the roads. So passenger rail is wonderful because it's a lot more accessible, not just for people in wheelchairs, but for all of us, more accessible than the bus service.
Oh, you were talking about the bus and
Yes.
wheelchair access on a bus. Is that a thing?
Well, I was speaking to Karina Moore at the Rail Summit that was held in the Sioux recently, and I was asking her about accessible buses on the Northland, on Ontario Northland's bus route. And there is one accessible bus for people in wheelchairs, and they have a special unit that comes out
Okay.
and lifts the wheelchair up into the bus, and the aisles would be wider and all that kind of thing. But there's only one bus for the whole system. And the way she spoke about it, you almost have to book it
Oh.
ahead of time for it to be on a particular route. That's not ideal. You know, I believe in universal accessibility, which is what a more modern and accessible train service would be all about. It's a no-brainer, and it's what we desperately need.
So we've heard now from a student and a young person, and we've heard now from someone who's advocating for people with disabilities. Let's now talk about...
A senior?
No, that's not where I was going with that one at all, and I was going to talk about you as someone who moved to Sault Ste. Marie from a different area. You know what? We're going to come back to you because we have to go to a break first. So when we come back, I want to talk about what surprised you when you moved to Sault Ste. Marie. Stay with us. We'll be back with more ONNpoint, talking about passenger rail service in Northern Ontario. Thanks for joining us. Welcome back to ONNpoint, and today we're talking about passenger rail service in Northern Ontario. And Linda, before we went to break, I was asking about when you first moved to Sault Ste. Marie. What did you discover?
Well, having traveled by train in Southern Ontario and Quebec my whole life, when I moved up here, I was really surprised that I couldn't go anywhere by train except to Hearst. And I love going to Hearst, but I wanted to go other places as well. I think it's so important for Sault Ste. Marie, for example, as a northeastern Ontario city, for us to be able to retain population and increase population. That's we're really trying to do that in order to be sustainable communities. As far as attracting people here, to attract people from Southern Ontario, for example, students at Algoma University or new professionals or just population in general, those are people who probably are going to want to stay in touch with people they know elsewhere. Similarly, to retain population, seniors like myself who have grandchildren who are living far away are tempted to move away to be closer to their extended families. But if they were able to travel by train, which is a very pleasant and enjoyable way to travel, they'd be more inclined, I believe, to stay here and just be connected by rail to the rest of their families. Tourists, we want to attract tourists, but it's known that tourists do not travel further than about 2 hours in the winter and at the most 4 hours in the summer by car to a destination. And so we have these incredible vistas of landscape here in Algoma District, but who's going to travel that far to come and really enjoy them? So it's all that attracting and retaining population that's very important to have upscale our transportation. We're like a third world country now. We don't even have, we're not anywhere near what the rest of the province is in Southern Ontario. We're functioning as if we're back in the dark ages.
And you talk about the tourism and the beauty and the natural environment that we have, and one of the things that rail does is it helps sustain our natural environment by being ecologically friendly, far more ecological than road transport.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what I don't understand is why isn't anybody listening? You guys have facts and figures and data and proof, and you're right sitting at this table with me are living examples of people who desperately require these services. We got an old man
An old lady.
who needs to drive, who doesn't want to drive the highways in winter, and we have a lovely lady who moved up here who was used to having rail transport, and we have a lady who has a disability and she wants to get out and around and she's entitled to it, and we have a student and a young man who wants to still be able to do things, and we have me, and I want to be able to just not have to stress out about driving. My partner works in Sudbury a lot in film, and that's a heck of a drive back and forth. And if I have to go back and forth in one day, driving, and sometimes I need to do that for my schedule, that's dangerous. Driver fatigue. And then what about the fact that this is like a one-horse town. If the highway shuts down, we can't get in or out. So all of these reasons, so who's not listening? Who's not listening, Dorothy?
All levels of government, I would say. The municipal level is sort of coming to understand the importance.
Joe Fertizzi is our ex-CAO. Was that what his title was? CAO? I think so. And he's now, is he not coming on board with you guys to help out with this? Or?
Not with us.
Well,
Not with you?
He was helping with the working group of the Algoma Central
okay.
passenger
Well,
train.
now
too.
he's come on board to try and work with the government and come up with some funding for the Huron Central.
So municipally, is it mostly about being verbal and vocal to the other levels of government? I mean, we're cash strapped.
Yes.
So it's more about making noise?
Yes,
Yeah.
and having the people in power, the municipal politicians, make the noise, taking it to the other levels and saying, you know, as Linda mentioned, we're out of the loop totally here, and we're being treated like a third world country, and we need these services. They need to really push it. It's sort of been on the back burner for many years. And now they're beginning to recognize as all of these different facets we've spoken about, the economic value, retaining people, all these things, they're starting to realize, and the tourism, what we're missing out on because we don't have that rail service. So we need to just ramp it up and then approach the other levels of government, the Ontario government and the federal government. And in Ontario, one thing I think we have going for us is the accessibility legislation.
Yes.
Absolutely, because by 2025, Ontario should be accessible. Well, we're not going to be accessible in the transportation end of things if we can't get out of our own community.
Brendan, you're working with Nordic for the summer, and I know that they were very involved paying attention to the just the recent provincial election. Were you paying attention to that as well? Were you to the issues? I mean, were you? I'm talking specifically about the rail issues and seeing who was supporting, which parties were supporting, or which candidates. I have to take a break, so I just want you to think about that. And if you have an answer for me, we'll hear it in just about a minute. Stay with us. On Point. And we'll be right back to hear from Brendan. Oh, last name is Sutherland from Hearst. Currently in Sault Ste. Marie, working as a summer student with Nordic. Stay with us on Point. We're back in a minute. So I wanted to ask Brendan about, you've been advocating for students and youth and the rail service and how it affects them through Nordic. Obviously, this was an election issue, and I understand this is probably one of the first times in a while that rail transport has been a platform. It's been even on the radar. Is that on your understanding as well?
Yeah, it was really exciting to see how much passenger rail was a focal point in this election, and it was really good to see each of the candidates respond to that. And with Ross O'Mano in office again, and him saying that rail was an interest of his, it'll be really interesting to see how the next few years go and where he's planning to take that.
So as far as following up after the election, Howie, what are the next steps then? Now that we have a new government in place, the Conservatives are in power, and we have a Conservative MPP, do you think that's going to make a difference?
Oh, definitely. And we're going to keep their feet to the fire. I'm just issuing a communique to the 4 mayors at the corners of the loop. Hearst.
Oh yeah, now this is the loop we're talking about. Well, I can't hold this up, but tell me the communities then. Hearst,
Cochrane, North Bay, and Sault Ste. Marie.
All right, there we go, I see
And
it.
if they would join together.
Those 4 mayors.
Those 4 mayors, and use their
Clout
to talk to government and pressure them to get this done.
Where does our mayor stand with this? Does anybody know?
Well, he is supportive of passenger service.
He is.
Yeah, and we've had meetings with him in the past, so.
Yeah, and he attended our rail summit
Yeah, he
and
was
spoke
there.
Oh,
welcome
the rail
to
summit, how
everybody.
did that go?
It was great. We had over 120 people there, and we had people from all over the Northeast and excellent speakers, real experts on all the different benefits that passenger rail can bring.
One of the other benefits that I forgot to mention was I know some people who have had sick children who've had to drive to Toronto to Sick Kids Hospital, and I can't even imagine what it would be like to be a parent with a child in your car that is in need of medical help. That's got to be on your mind. The last thing you want to do is have to be concerned about road conditions, or once again, driving with a sick kid in the car, you're being distracted. I mean, just to be able to get on a train and to put your focus where it needs to be, on your family, on your child, and not have to stress out about that trip. They've got enough on their minds. There's so many other reasons too. So how can people make a difference now in our community? How can they get involved?
Well, they can follow us on our website, leave their name for our...
At the end, Linda, we will be putting up a website picture at the end in the next segment. But so go to the website.
Yeah, they can be on our email list. We send out newsletters to people with the latest of how we're doing. They can also attend meetings that we have, write letters to the politicians about this, and generally keep involved with us.
And what about with Nordic? You're here for the summer. Do you foresee more work on your part with the issue of rail transport and passenger rail service?
Whether I'm working with Nordic or not, I'm definitely still going to be an advocate for passenger rail, because it really is an issue that affects a wide variety of people of all age groups. And as a student, I think that it is an issue that people need to be focused on. And a lot of students don't even realize how it could affect them or benefit them.
Are you going back to Hearst anytime soon?
No, I'm not. But if there was a train, I could.
You would go home more often if you could?
I definitely would visit. It would be a safer and more relaxing way of traveling, especially in the winter. You do not want to be traveling on road by car or bus on that Highway 17, Highway 11. It can get really nasty in the winter with the icy road conditions.
We were talking about this one particular, was it the what's it called, the Polar Express.
Polar Express.
And is that still running?
Yes.
Yes.
But it's the only one that's still running, because the Northlander has been gone, it may be coming back, but it's uncertain right now. And this Polar Express, so you can get from Moosonee to
Cochrane.
Cochrane. Moosonee to Cochrane. Woohoo! So if I want to go to Moosonee, I got to get myself to Cochrane first. And if I'm coming from Moosonee, want to get to Cochrane, then what happens?
Then you take a bus all the way to Toronto or to wherever else you're going.
Good
And
heavens!
it's a long, long way.
It is.
But, my God, yes.
And the benefits of this whole loop approach is you've got all these the rail line's already there. I think you mentioned it. The track's already there.
Yes.
So you've got, if you get say you get the Northlander up and running from Toronto to Cochrane, then you add these other pieces that feed into it. I mean, think of what that means to, well, if we had something from here to Sudbury, and then we could connect up with the Northlander, Sudbury, or over to North Bay, then North Bay to Toronto. I've done that route, the Northlander. I've gone by bus and connected with the train up to my sister's in Englehart. I did that one of the last trips the train made.
Oh.
I did, and there were lots of people on it, and people were really upset to see that train service disappearing.
Wow. All right, we're going to take our final break and then come back to say goodbye with final thoughts. So stay with us. Thanks for sticking around on point, and we'll see you in about a minute. Be right back. So Linda, as we're wrapping up, you mentioned the rails. Oh, I'm sorry. Hi, Linda. Dorothy. You mentioned the rail system. We have the rails.
Yes.
The infrastructure's there?
Yes, that's correct. So from here to Hearst, for example, the rails are there, and there's also the Missinabee Cree, who have a business plan, who are all ready to run the rail from the Sault to Hearst, or to collaborate with someone else. So for example, Ontario Northland runs the Polar Bear Express we had just talked about from Cochrane to Moosonee. They used to run the Northlander, Toronto to Cochrane. They could run that, they could run the others, they could run it in collaboration with other groups. Like, it could happen.
This is where I start to get a little angry, because if our government is serious about creating opportunity for our Indigenous people and
Yes.
creating employment,
Exactly.
then they better get smart and start following up on what they've said. Now, speaking of
Yes.
that, as far as the trains themselves go, there's a lot of technology that's not being taken seriously.
Absolutely. Bombardier, one of the largest manufacturers of passenger trains in the world, has systems in Europe called clean diesel, and they are environmentally friendly. They meet all the standards in Europe for the environment, and they could be used here. Here's an example of one plowing through the snow in Sweden.
Plowing through the snow in Sweden,
And
a
why-
Canadian-made train that are being sold everywhere but here.
But here, absolutely.
And so now, I'm not going to call her Dorothy. I'm going to call her Linda. Linda, I'm sorry about that. Oh, wait, I'm going to come back to you because we're going to get the website. But first, Brendan. Hello, Brendan. You are going to continue your work with this, with the rail initiative. How?
I'm currently getting in contact with Northern Ontarian student unions at different universities and colleges to let them know how the passenger rail would benefit, because it is really beneficial to Northern post-secondary institutions, because it encourages Northern students to stay in the North and provides access to these different communities, and it can really boost enrollment, which is something that Northern Ontario post-secondary institutions are struggling with, and I think it would be really a good viable option for them.
Thank you for that. And now, finally, to Linda. Thank you. And by the way, Linda is the one who actually brought all of us together today, and I want to thank you for your efforts. The website. We're going to put up a
Website.
graphic for the website. Go ahead and
Okay,
talk
so
about it.
for the Coalition for Algoma Passenger Trains, the website is captrains.ca. That's captrains.ca. And for NEORN, the Northeastern Ontario Rail Network, it's NEORN.ca. And we'd love to have people visit it and contribute to making this work. It's time that it worked, and we have a huge investment in our economy that can result from this. Just the Algoma Central Railway alone, for the $2 million that used to be invested by the government in that, it brought 50 million benefits, economic benefits to our region, and that's every year, as well as $6 million in tax revenues. So this is something which is not, it's really urgent for our economy.
All right, well, thank you all again for being here, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Tim Murphy, and this has been On Point. And if you want to know more, you got the website information, and you can write to your local politicians. We'll see you next time, On Point.